A
Okay.
5-game slate in the association. How worried are you about the Milwaukee Bucks? Are the Dallas Mavericks back? Are the Pelicans buried? So much to discuss from Saturday's slate of hoops.
When that final buzzer rings, you know it's time for Locked On NBA Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. It's the true NBA fans' one stop for all the action. Every game, every night. It's Locked On NBA Game Night. Tipping off now.
Let's get it going on Locked On NBA Game Nights. I'm your host, Rylan Stiles, host of the Locked On Thunder podcast. Joining me today, as always, is Gavin Shaw, host of the Locked On Knicks podcast. Had a 5-game slate in the association. How are we feeling as the final buzzer sounds?
It was a fun day. I did not have high expectations for it coming in, given that Victor Wembanyama was out. That kind of took some of the weight out of the premier game of the day. But we got a thriller in Boston. Jason Tatum, overtime buzzer beater. The Hornets hold on to win by 1. You heard their announcer yell out, "Good shot," when Giannis pulled up from 16 feet away. Insane shade. And then De'Aaron Fox, 111 points over his last 2 games. Just absurd. So it ended up being a great night of basketball. I'm excited to talk through it with you, Rylan.
It was a very fun day of basketball because we start in the afternoon with that Milwaukee game where the Bucks do fall to the Charlotte Hornets 115-114. Charlotte barely held on. Let's start on the Bucks side of things. First and foremost, has your concern meter continued to grow with these losses? Obviously, Dame Lillard is out, and with a caveat of they do play in the East where no one's playing particularly great right now, and that buys you some time. But how concerned are you from Milwaukee?
I think it's been stable. Like a lot of these issues have just been the issues since the very beginning of the year. Brook Lopez is no longer the same guy, unless I missed something in the last couple of days. Still no established timeline for Chris Middleton to come back. Dame Lillard obviously out right now. And then you have a team where it's pretty much just Giannis and the Giannettes. I don't know if anyone's christened that in Milwaukee yet. If you want to throw the trademark on it, I will not get mad about it. But like you look at just some of the lineups they were playing down the stretch of this game. Like Giannis didn't come back in until about 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and they're closing with like AJ Green, Gary Trent Jr., Pat Connaughton, Taurean Prince, Bobby Portis, and I'm just sort of like, okay, like the other AJ Green who didn't take a 2-pointer for his first 70 shots this year, and he's been one of their better guys. Andre Jackson Jr. hit 2 big threes down the stretch, but Pat Connaughton 5 points in the final minute. Like these guys actually played pretty well. But that's where Milwaukee's at right now. To beat Charlotte, like you're needing like these random like role players that for like I was going to say other contenders. I'm just going to say for contenders because I don't put Milwaukee in that category right now. For contenders would either not be playing or would be like 8th, 9th, 10th men. And like Brook Lopez, like in a game where like you need him to step up and provide some offense, 2 for 7, 1 for 5 from 3, like that's just not him anymore. You look at the rim protection stats that have been so great for this team for years. Like they're like near the bottom of the league in terms of protecting the rim right now. It is just not the same team. When they get healthy, it's going to look a lot better. I'm not saying it's all over. When there's a Giannis, there's a way, but there's just not a lot of reason to believe right now in Milwaukee.
Yeah, I think that in Milwaukee, things are really concerning because, number one, people are just recklessly throwing out the whole like Giannis asking a trade or getting messy or whatever. And there's not been a ton of resistance to that to where it makes you kind of buy into maybe there's something there. Now, I think that a Giannis trade is just too hard to pull off in the midst of a season. I think that's more of an offseason thing. And Giannis is still playing as one of the best players in the world. But when you look around this roster, I mean, DeLon Wright has not been good since the Polk administration. And he's their starting guard right now. I don't know what they're going to end up doing. That's obviously due to Dame being out. But there's not a lot of hope that things can get better. And there's also not a lot of hope that you can make things better. Because at the trade deadline, what are you giving up to improve this roster? It just feels like you're hoping that all of a sudden Dame and Giannis click together and they go on this run. But they're not in the contenders category for me, even though they do have one of the best players in the world. They're not for you. And I'm not sure that they can get there in this season. And then you look at this specific game, I love the call that it was a great shot from Giannis in the mid-range, but he is shooting a career high on long mid-ranges this year. So it's a shot he felt comfortable going to, but maybe I'm being too critical of a shot because he is shooting so well in the mid-range this year, and it's by far his career high. But you're Giannis. Like go to the rim and just take what you want from the Charlotte Hornets and get a win, and you can kind of breathe the sigh of relief, even though I understand he's making over half his long mid-range shots right now in the 84th percentile.
Yeah, look, it was a situation where he settled, right? And that happened a couple of times in the fourth quarter. He also just murdered someone in transition on another coast-to-coast jam that made it 110-109. But I find it hard to pin it on his shoulders. They had a stat in the broadcast today. He's responsible for 41% of his team's points via scoring or assist right now. That is, of course, the number one mark in the NBA. I don't think it's reasonable to ask any more of him. And we're I look to put blame is on this front office, and not really with the penny pinching moves that they made. I hesitate to even do it for the Damian Lillard trade, as much as that seemingly hasn't worked out. I don't know if they'd be in a dramatically better position with Drew Holiday. They'd be closer to the identity they had when this was a championship team. I don't know if they'd be that much closer to winning right now with Drew there. And when the Dame trade happened, it was universally praised. I was way in favor. It was that is the most unstoppable pick and roll. You're talking about the second greatest deep three-point shooter, second greatest three-point shooter history in NBA history, with the greatest downhill threat in modern NBA history in Giannis. What are you supposed to do with that? And honestly, the two-man game, I think we talked about it a couple weeks ago during our first show. It started to look a little bit better. And that was what was so scary about that first Cavs loss on the Donovan Mitchell buzzer beater 2 Saturdays ago. It was that Dame played perfectly. Giannis played perfectly. They actually played extremely well off each other, leveraging their mutual gravity to create easy shots for these guys who desperately need it. And yet without Chris Middleton, there's just not enough tertiary offensive talent for it to matter against good teams. And then if you don't have Dame, as we saw tonight, you can lose to a mediocre team in Charlotte. And I just look back at their draft picks over the last couple of years, taking A.J. Johnson this year, who might be really good down the road, had flashes in Summer League, but a 19-year-old who didn't really do anything in the NBL, when guys I don't want to play Monday morning quarterback this, but guys like Ryan Dunn were on the board, who would be a key rotation piece. I think he'd be playing 30 minutes a game for this team. And of course, they're not going to make the perfect pick every time, but it's been a couple of years now between Beauchamp, between Jackson, where they've taken guys who can't shoot, which doesn't make sense around Giannis, or guys like Johnson who just aren't ready to contribute. And you have arguably still the second best player of the world smack dab in the middle of his prime. And it doesn't feel like they've taken guys who make sense around him. They've struck out in free agency. Obviously, Gary Trent Jr. is not what they hoped he would be, at least so far. And because of that, the depth infrastructure is just not there for this team to win big.
Yeah, I just think that the Bucks, the sad part about it, I think for Milwaukee fans, is just it felt like you were doing everything right, because I do still to this day think that the Dame trade was a good idea. Yeah, it's just up until this draft, even Beauchamp, it still felt like that was kind of in the give him a pass type of a front office move. But this draft was just awful of A.J. Johnson and Tyler Smith. These are two guys who would have been fine on a long-term rebuild, but there were so many other higher floor pro-ready contributors that they obviously desperately need, and that in real time people were against those picks, and it's kind of bared out. But this was a bad loss, but a good win for the Hornets, who really looked the part of a playoff team in the East.
Yeah, they were great. I mentioned that stat earlier that Giannis responsible for 41% of his team's points. That leads the NBA. Guess who's second? LaMelo Ball. He's responsible for 38% of his team's points. And it was interesting to not even contrast it. I'm going to compare it with what De'Aaron Fox did later in the day, where both those young point guards, LaMelo obviously a little younger, just put their teams on their backs. I tracked it for De'Aaron. I did not track for LaMelo how many points he was involved with down the stretch, but it just felt like over and over and over again, he was laying his body down the line. The usage was ridiculous, where he just kept going to the rim over and over again. And what stood out to me as someone who's gotten to watch him in bits and pieces this year is just how much he's improved his pick and roll craft. And I think that's turning him from someone who was just a joy to watch, but not necessarily playing winning basketball, to someone who has the Hornets, being a respectable team, if not a great team so far this year. Just his ability to manipulate pace, to change the cadence of his dribble, to get by guys, to hang around the rim and get to the foul line. Some of the kickouts, the and one he had with 107 left in the game, going at Giannis, got like a little bit like we should note here, while we are absolutely burying the Bucks, they lost on a terrible call where it looked like LaMelo tripped over his own feet and Milwaukee was out of challenges, so couldn't go after it. That being said, like he did enough down the stretch here. Diabate, a former Knick great, shout out, was incredible. 10 offensive rebounds in this one. Milwaukee gave up 16 offensive rebounds total. That is one more than the league leading Rockets average per game this year. So it was just a gritty win in a game where like LaMelo didn't shoot well, Brandon Miller didn't shoot well, Miles Bridges was like fine, Grant Williams was 2 for 8. Like it was just an impressive grinded out win for the Hornets, and they're playing respectable ball under Charles Lee right now.
It was a fun game in Charlotte. We'll talk more about this slate of games, including where should we put the Kings in the list of contenders and pretenders? But first, I want to say right now, but good friends over at BetterHelp, go check out BetterHelp today because they're great. And I think that the best part about BetterHelp is that a lot of us can acknowledge that we can benefit from therapy, but we always have these outs of, well, I don't have time to go to a brick and mortar building and go find a local therapist, and it doesn't work with my schedule. But that's where BetterHelp comes in. It's entirely online. It's entirely suited around your schedule. All you do is go to BetterHelp and you fill out this questionnaire and you just match with a licensed therapist. And after that questionnaire, they're going to do their best to match you with a therapist. If it's not the perfect fit right away, no problem. You can just redo it until you find the one for you. Once you find that one for you, it's seamless. It's entirely online, convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. So go there right now and get the benefits of therapy around your time. See what you're grateful for and share that gratitude and let it flow through you in this season of gratitude at betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA. That's 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. We're back on the Locked On NBA podcast, Locked On Game Nights, talking about the Saturday night slate for November 16th. I'm Rylan Stiles. Alongside me is Gavin Shaw. We're talking about the Sacramento Kings in this segment. The Kings got an impressive win in this game, holding off the feisty Utah Jazz, who we'll also talk about. But it really, as we alluded to before the break, came down to De'Aaron Fox, who had 49 points in this game, including 3 for 4 from beyond the arc and 9 assists, 2 steals. What have you seen from the Kings this week, and kind of where do you place them in that pecking order?
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier, 111 points over the last 2 games for De'Aaron Fox. I think he had a great game, the one before that. Finishes tonight 16 of 30 from the field, 3 of 4 from distance, 14 of 19 from the charity stripe, 49 points, 9 assists. Oh, wait, so I thought he hit 51. I saw the wrong graphic. So I guess 109. My bad. I was over-exaggerating. He was involved in 8 of the 12 buckets down the stretch for the Kings. Also threw in 4 free throws in the fourth quarter. Just doing everything for this team, right? And it's so funny because, like, I feel like he maybe this is big market bias. It's anti-light the beam propaganda, but I feel like he's been out of those like best point guard conversations the last 2 years. Last season, the focus was more on Sabonis and putting him on triple-double watch. This year, DeMar DeRozan has just been obscene to start the season, but Fox showed you like he belongs in those conversations. Like he could arguably be I don't know, top 15 player in the league, top 20 player in the league. He's looked like a top 5 player in the league these last 2 games. But for your broader question, like it is still so hard to say. 8-6 on the season right now. Obviously very beat up at the moment. No DeMar DeRozan, no Domantas Sabonis, no Malik Monk in this game. And they've been without their prized draft pick Devin Carter the entire season. So I don't think we've seen the full version of this Kings team. I really like the steps that Keegan Murray has made on both ends of the floor. I think his ability to continue to make a leap is going to be a separator here, because you're just hoping they can find a way to play enough defense. And I wonder if there's a way they could go out. I know I throw his name out, I feel like every time I do Locked On NBA, but go out and get someone like Mitchell Robinson, like find a great rim protector. And maybe Kings fans would argue, all right, that neuters what we do best on offense with Domantas Sabonis. I just think it's hard to take them seriously with their current defensive infrastructure. They can outscore any team on any given night. Again, it's just like, are they going to be able to get stops in the biggest games?
Yeah, and I think that you never want to overreact, especially here before Thanksgiving, to an NBA season. But what's kind of shifted for me is no longer an outright dismissal of the possibility that the Kings could have a special run in the postseason, but it hinges on what we have not seen yet. And we haven't seen it yet, not to any fault of their own, but you mentioned that we have not seen this Kings team be at full strength yet. That's why I think that this game was a pretty impressive win, because Utah, despite their poor record, has been a feisty team in almost every single game. And to beat them with no Sabonis, no DeRozan, haven't even seen Devin Carter, who's doing some on-court work, make his season debut. Didn't even have Malik Monk. Like, you were missing a large chunk of your playoff rotation. Like, whenever you get to the playoffs, Monk and Sabonis and DeRozan are going to eat up most of the minutes, along with Fox. So, like, this team has enough pieces to where I'm curious how they see it at the end. Because obviously, when you put more cooks in the kitchen, can you get those 60-point nights from De'Aaron Fox? Okay, probably not, because there's not enough shots to go around. But how close to that can you get? Like, how close of the Fox scoring evolution can you get when you add in Sabonis, when you add in DeRozan? And it's what we've kind of seen in the recent trends of, like, these recent teams who have gone on surprise runs. It's taken a young guard taking a step. It's taken Shea for the Thunder, Ant for the Wolves. Luka, of course, way back whenever he took his first step for the Mavericks. He's also gone to 2 Western Conference Finals. But, like, it's taken a broad jump. Could Fox be in the midst of a very broad jump? I think he is. Now, how does that play once you introduce these other moving parts around him?
Yeah, I wonder, like maybe if you want to keep this core together, could you turn Malik Monk, Devin Carter, and some future draft equity into an elite wing, into like a Herb Jones or Trey Murphy if New Orleans, I guess Murphy just extended, so it's not going to be him, but maybe someone like a Herb Jones. They just need one more really high-level defender in their starting lineup. What I really like about them is, like, this is what you're just getting at, like if Fox can harness this confidence and keep it going throughout the year, like, obviously Utah is not the best defensive team in the world, but it was ridiculous. It was like he was on one of those, like, express walkways at the airport and everyone else was, like, carrying 100 pounds of luggage. The way for the second straight night, he was just gliding by and over again making the right decision, like rejecting screens when he should. When the Kings blitzed him, like, threw a hook pass to hit Mason Jones, who I honestly did not know existed before tonight, on the roll for a layup. Like, a crazy drive with that 4 Jazz converged on him into, like, a hook pass out to Jordan McLaughlin for 3. Like, if he can, again, just kind of apply that rim pressure over and over again and using that to create an easy shot for a Sabonis, an easy shot for a DeRozan, that is just an elite playoff weapon. And then DeMar DeRozan, like, he looks as spry as ever for a guy whose career was defined by elite athleticism early on. Now it's defined by everything else, right? His footwork, his touch, like the dying embers of, like, the mid-range game in the NBA. But they have guys who can close playoff games is what I'm trying to say, Rylan, in a very long-winded way. So it just kind of feels like if they have the defense to stay in it, they can compete with anyone. Like, I don't know too many teams that have 2 options at the end of games as good as Fox, as good as DeRozan, and a third guy as good as Sabonis.
Yeah, I'm no longer going to dismiss their ability to pull off an upset in the playoffs as long as they can sustain this Fox scoring streak and, as you've been highlighting, fix their defense, because you can outscore teams in the regular season. The defense is a whole different ball game in the playoffs.
And I just want to say real quick, they're 16th so far. So if Kings fans are crying foul, they've been okay. I think we just both have our doubts how that translates to playoff basketball.
Correct. I mean, they've done it to a point. They've got to continue to do it. And I think that we can both project that, like, you're not, whenever you add Sabonis and DeRozan, you're adding good players, not exactly adding, great defenders whenever they play a larger sample size together with Fox. So we'll see how it all looks. But coming up, are the Pelicans cooked after yet another loss? Are the Raptors one of the most fun, bad teams in the NBA? And are the Mavericks back on track with just 1 win over the Spurs? But first, I want to say right now, our good friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book, and they have everything for you. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. That's FanDuel Sportsbook app. It gives you everything you need to place a live bet on the NFL, all in one place. So whenever you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can hop on it right then. You can also bet before the game and even bet on futures as well at FanDuel.com to join today. And when you do, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet that you place at FanDuel, including on tomorrow's NBA slate, where the Mavericks on the second night of back-to-back are 5.5-point underdogs in Oklahoma City. Go check it out today at FanDuel.com. We're back on the Locked On NBA podcast, Locked On NBA Game Nights. I'm Rylan Stiles, host of Locked On Thunder. That's Gavin Shaw, host of Locked On Knicks. And we're continuing on this 5-game slate. First, taking you out to Dallas, where perhaps the Mavericks got back on track.
And against a short-handed San Antonio Spurs team, maybe one of the worst rosters they're going to see this season. No Wembanyama, no Vassell, no Sohan. The Mavericks, everybody basically back for them. And the beginning of this game did not really give the Mavericks any confidence at all. This team did not look coordinated. They did not look connected at all in this game. Another slow start for the Dallas Mavericks. They came out in the third quarter, and then they finally looked like a team that should be dominating the San Antonio Spurs team. They came out with force. They came out with an actual plan on offense in the second half. Daniel Gafford and Kyrie Irving were awesome in that quarter. Kyrie put in 11 points, and Gafford 12 points in that third quarter, 22 points overall, a couple of blocks for him as well. He's just so much better coming off the bench and playing against second units. He feasts against smaller guys, against secondary centers, and that's the role that I think he needs to play going forward. So the Mavs take this one. They'll take the win. Not a ton of confidence in it, but it's a win.
So Nick does not have a ton of confidence in this win for the Dallas Mavericks, but I do, Gavin. I'm buying that the Mavericks are back on track in our first item on buy or sell, because you look at their record, and yes, it's gotten messy, but it's been through 4 straight one-possession losses in the clutch for a team that has Luka Doncic, who's typically ice cold in the clutch, and a team that throughout this stretch of messy basketball, they've been missing pieces here and there. Now they're fully healthy, and you just look at how a season typically goes. Basketball as itself as a game of runs. The schedule for most teams is also a game of runs. We have a really good stretch, maybe a mediocre stretch, maybe a bad stretch, maybe a great stretch, and you just kind of ride the wave of an 82-game season. And yes, they had a very poor week or two, but now you beat the Spurs and you took care of business. Second night of a back-to-back. Yes, there's travel involved. It'll be tough, and Oklahoma City's a good team, but Oklahoma City has 0 big men. You have 2, and not only 2 big men who can exploit the Thunder, because where the Thunder are able to overcome not having Chet Holmgren, Isaiah Hartenstein, or J. Will this week has been because they're playing centers who they can play off the floor. And once you get them off the floor, you're a better small ball team than the other team is. For Dallas, as you saw in the playoffs, you cannot play them off the floor and force them to go small. Lively is too good, and Gafford is at least going to be comparable, and at least competent enough to sustain success for Dallas. So they could easily go 2-0 this weekend and feel really good about themselves. Plus, you have Luka and Kyrie, which is just the head of the snake. So I'm not worried at all about Dallas, even in the midst of a really messy stretch.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. 1-6 on the season in clutch games. That is something that, to your point, especially with 2 of the great ISO players in NBA history, Luka and Kyrie, tends to reverse itself over time. So I've been listening. I promise I'm not sucking up to our buddy Nick, but a lot of Locked On Mavs this week, because I've been fascinated with Dallas. It's been a little bit of a trend around the NBA where teams with title expectations, my Knicks, the Timberwolves, the Mavs, certainly not your Thunder, Rylan, congratulations, have not played up to expectations so far. So I'm like, all right, what are the root issues here? And it seems to be summed up as generally Luka Doncic, obviously very inefficient to start this year. Last season, he shot obscenely well, maybe unsustainably well on step-back jumpers. This year, that's tumbled back to earth. Obviously, the play against the Jazz, everyone saw it just totally spaced out on D, but that has been kind of a microcosm for Luka Doncic, where he has just not been locked in, particularly in clutch moments. It's almost like the intensity drops off a little bit for him, and it doesn't seem like he's fully invested. And maybe that's a little bit of a championship loss hangover and saying, hey, I've been to the biggest stage. This regular season crap doesn't really mean anything to me anymore. But a team takes its cues from his leaders. And when you're spending your games foul baiting and complaining about not getting those calls and having crummy body language, I've always believed that has a carryover effect. And it's why I love Jalen Brunson. I'm sure it's why you love having Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in your life. And Luka at times is an amazing leader and a killer competitor, but can also bring you down with some of that. That being said, I think that is ultimately more of a playoff concern than a regular season concern, because the talent is just too high. All the size they can throw around Luka Doncic now that they're healthy, with Lively, with PJ Washington, with Gafford. You're seeing these bench lineups that have all this shooting, but all this height. I love the one they threw out there today. It was Jaden Hardy, Derek Lively, Maxi Kleba, Klay Thompson and Luka Doncic, where like 4 of the 5 guys are 6'8" or taller, and yet you have this incredible spacing, and they just ran like a really simple like pick and roll with Hardy and Lively, and it ended with like Hardy like hitting Lively like pretty quickly on the short roll with a hook pass. Lively just went right down Main Street for a jam. I'm like, I don't know what you do as a defense. Like, you can't help off Max, you can't help off Klay, you certainly can't help off of Luka. Like, what are you supposed to do? And obviously, look, no Wemby tonight made them look a lot better than they might be at the moment. I think there will still be growing pains. I'm not the biggest believer that Klay Thompson is able to give you whatever, like 4 or 5 months of great basketball that you probably need to win a championship and to beat OKC and to beat Boston. But I just think there's so much talent there, and maybe we'll get to it more in just a sec. But I thought Quentin Grimes, then bringing him back into the rotation, was a key piece, and his ability to be closeouts and defend at the point of attack really sort of rounds out that rotation.
Let's go out to New Orleans and see how the Pelicans fared against the Lakers. And let's talk about the Celtics and Raptors as well.
Pelicans lose 104-99 to the Los Angeles Lakers here in the Smoothie King Center. I'm Jake Madison, host of the daily Locked On Pelicans podcast. I know Pelicans fans are going to get tired of this, but it was another moral victory for New Orleans. They're about as shorthanded as you can get. They ran a lineup out there that included 3 two-way guys. Think about that for a second. A guy on a vet minimum deal and someone who was basically out of the league a year ago and signed during the season. And they played it really close to the Lakers. It took an amazing LeBron James three-pointer basically right at the end to ice the game. Otherwise, New Orleans had a chance to win this. Wins are going to come soon for New Orleans when they get healthy, whenever that might be. The good news is you're seeing Brandon Ingram play much better than he was a couple of other games. It's back-to-back 30-point games for him where he looks like a guy that can lead this team. The Pelicans desperately need that right now, but moral victories until they get some health here, which, by the way, might be sooner than you think. You'll see CJ McCollum back soon. More over at the Locked On Pelicans podcast.
The West is obviously a juggernaut, but real quick, are the Pelicans cooked? Like how much more leash do they get before we really start to be concerned for their ability to climb back out of this and make the postseason?
Yeah, I would put them in like half baked. Can we throw out Ben and Jerry's flavors on this podcast? All right, we're going. I love some half baked. That being said, I didn't think the roster made a whole lot of sense coming into the season, and I was really confused with what they were doing. Obviously, I'm not going to take credit with predicting that Dyson Daniels was going to turn into what Dyson Daniels has turned into. Right now, they could really use a guy who's going to double the NBA's all-time record for deflections. That would be great. Easier to say that when DeJounte Murray is not playing for them, but I don't really get where like a him and CJ McCollum backcourt makes a lick of sense. Both guys who want the ball, who need the ball. Brandon Ingram needs the ball. He's thriving because he's gotten the ball, and he was amazing tonight. Like just a nasty step back three, like late in the fourth quarter to give them a lead. I think it was over Dalton Connect, but they're not a team, even when healthy, that makes a ton of sense. I like a bunch of the individual talent there. Misi's showing like he's a lot more advanced, I think, than anyone anticipated. Not just like a run and jump big. Like he has a little bit of game to him. Trey Murphy is amazing. I've been a fan for a long time. Herb Jones, when he gets healthy, obviously one of the best defenders in the NBA. Like no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But this team just makes no sense. And I'm wondering if they're close to making a deal to maybe just consolidate a little bit for this year, get some of the draft equity back they put out. And if I were them, I would be gunning for a top 10 pick because obviously this is going to be an incredible draft. Perhaps they get really lucky and the Milwaukee Bucks fall into the top 4 and they get that pick as well. That's the direction I would be thinking right now. But they have a front office led by David Griffin that doesn't want to get fired and knows they're on a short leash, to your point. So maybe they will go all in on staying competitive this year.
We'll end the show going out to Boston to see how the Toronto Raptors failed against the Boston Celtics.
The Raptors lose, but the first strike in the battle against the three-point revolution has been landed in a 126-123 overtime loss to the Boston Celtics. Those dastardly three-point spamming Boston Celtics who win this game on a pretty stupid Jason Tatum heave. Absolute prayer of a three-pointer at the buzzer in overtime. The Raptors defended it beautifully. What are you going to do? Sometimes when you play against a team whose whole personality is jacking triples, those triples are going to fall and hurt you. But the Raptors in this game played incredible basketball. It was one of their best defensive efforts of the season for sure. On offense, they obliterated the Celtics on the inside. Jakob Poeltl in this game, 35 points. 16 of 19. He's a push shot god. He can't miss. He was unbelievable. No answer for him. RJ Barrett had his first career triple-double. 15 assists for him in this game. to go along with 25 points. Some missed free throws at the end that he'll want back for sure. The Raptors win the game if he hits those. You got to feel good about the way the Raptors brought it in this one. And with the Celtics taking 61 threes and hitting 21, while the Raptors took in total 23 threes, this was a win for the power of the two-pointer, baby.
My biggest takeaway is that the Raptors are my favorite bad team to watch in the NBA. I love what Grady Dick's doing. I just love what the Raptors have. I love Jonathan Magbo. I love all their young guys. And they keep games really competitive and fun, as you saw tonight against Boston. Obviously, Locked On Raptors' biggest takeaway was the three-point shot. Not good. Not good for the sport. Where do you fall on that, Gavin, to end the show?
Yeah, I don't know. Canada's on the metric system, so maybe two
true.
over three.
It gives them a lot of problems.
I don't know what kind of math Sean Woodley's doing out there. No, I love Sean. Maybe my favorite Locked On host. He does a great job over on Locked On Raptors. But this team is fun. I wish they had this isn't just my Knicks bias leaking in. Really wish they had Emmanuel Quickly. I was ready to tune in to every game. He might be my favorite player in the league. Obviously, no Scotty Barnes, no Bruce Brown. That is just a lot of playmaking talent, a lot of connectivity. Like, they really, really need Quickly shooting to open things up. They're playing a lot of non-shooters, and that is why Sean is making the case that 2 is more than 3 right now. But it's been super fun to see the RJ Barrett playmaking leap, him operating as a primary initiator. Trust me, we've been talking about this for years over on Locked On Knicks. Like, he's finally making that jump. Like, he's another guy who's pick and roll craft has really jumped. Like, saw play in this game where he snaked the pick and roll, got a defender on his hip, kept him in booty jail, looped it around Cornette to Mobo for a dunk. Just his strength and patience around the rim, like shrugging off Neemias Queta with like a little elbow bump before laying it in. Like, great drive to tie it at 123. Down the stretch of this one. Obviously not a very good game for Grady Dick, but I've been watching him and him just turning into like a mid-range assassin, and to the point that teams are chasing him around and top locking him most games. Like, it is inherently interesting to see talented young players kind of push to the brink of what they can do, because obviously it's very in fashion, especially when guys get drafted to competitive franchises, to bring them along slowly and say like, hey, we don't want to overtax you. We don't want to give you PTSD. Like, RJ Barrett's being pushed. Grady Dick is being pushed. Jakob Poeltl, I don't know if he needed to be, but he's being pushed, and it's kind of fun to see the results.
It is a lot of fun to see this Raptors team. But Gavin, thanks for joining us. We'll be back again next Saturday. But first, you can check out Locked On NBA Game Nights Sunday through Saturday, where we return once again, and check out our midday show as well. But Gavin, this was a ton of fun. And until next week, be good and be good to one another.